Hi, everybody. I'm Sophia, and today we're going to be having another edition of Debate Do's and Don'ts. And so, specifically, we're going to be focusing on speaker points. So, the first do, and it's probably one of the most important do's, is to always make sure that you're adapting to your judge. And a lot of times, I think that this can get overlooked, but ultimately, the person that you're trying to convince that you win in the debate is the judge. So no matter how hard you try to convince the other team, they're not going to budge. But your judge is the one that makes the final decision. So you always want to make sure you're adapting to them. So always watch what they're doing. So maybe if they smile at something that you said, that's really good. Then you should maybe extend on that later in the debate. But if they kind of make a little bit of a frown face or they're flowing, looks kind of like paused or maybe a little bit confused, that might be an indication for you to go back and sort of re-explain some things to your judge that they understand. And then another super, super important thing that's definitely easy to forget is that in cross-examination, a lot of times it's easy to look at the other team because that's who you're talking to. But during cross-ex, you always want to try and make eye contact with your judge because that's the opportunity to kind of explain to them what's going on in cross-ex. So the next one is to speak clearly. And I know that a lot of people know this, and you guys have heard this a million times, but that's just how important it is. In debate, we kind of like to say this saying that clarity is king, and it's true. So even though you see a lot of these debaters speaking really fast, which we like to call spreading, it's always more important to make fewer arguments, but to be really clear and to go into depth about them than to speak as fast as you possibly can and run through 10, 15 arguments, but you haven't really explained what any of them are. And so as you progress through your debate career, some things that you can do are speaking drills. And those are just different ways to kind of work on your clarity and speed together. A lot of times they focus on clarity. Like a very popular speaking drills, people will put like a pen in their mouth and it helps kind of work your tongue around the pen. And then you take the pen out of your mouth and it'll kind of help you speak clearer. And then the other thing with speaking clearly is that debate tournaments usually happen pretty early in the morning. And so just keep in mind to try not to mumble. So really open your mouth. A lot of times I like to tell some of my students to eat a good breakfast that kind of gets your mouth moving, or to even chew a piece of gum if you're really tired, but at least it sort of opens your mouth and kind of warms you up to get ready to talk. All right, so the next one that we have is don't only explain the tagline. And I love this picture so much because this girl has her computer with her, but if you look at where her eyes are, she's actually facing forward. And that means she's not reading right off of her computer. And that's something that we really like to emphasize in debate is thinking and speaking on your feet and using your own ideas. So something to think about in terms of not only explaining the tagline is to use ARE. And so that stands for assertion, reasoning, and evidence. So if you think of your tagline kind of as like a summary or like your assertion, you should really focus on your reasoning and evidence to back up your argument because a lot of times that's kind of what finally convinces the judge and will push them to write you in their ballot as a winner. So sometimes reasoning and evidence is especially tricky. A lot of times it's the hardest part of debate. I always like to ask myself why. Well, why is this assertion true? Why am I thinking this way? Or you can just start your sentence with because, and it'll automatically force you to go into reasoning. So though your evidence is very important, the tagline of your cards are super important, you always want to think of your evidence as a reference, especially in your rebuttals later on in the debate. So the next one is to organize your speech. And this is definitely another thing I think sometimes people forget that this can really make the difference in your speaker points. So if your speech isn't as organized, judges will definitely kind of take off a couple points for it because it makes it hard for them to catch your arguments. So the most important thing in terms of organizing your speech is you want to do whatever it is that makes the judge able to get down your argument. Because if the judge can't get down your arguments, well, then that's not very good because it'll be hard for them to look back on it when they're making their RFD to kind of see what arguments you made, how much you extended them, and how good your arguments were. So there are a lot of different ways that you can do this. One we like to call line by line. So that's when you go down your flow, literally look down your flow at each argument the other team made and you answer them one by going in the order that they're on your flow. And that makes it really easy for the judge to flow and kind of keep track of what's going on in the debate. Another thing that you can do to kind of make sure your speech is organized is to signpost. And that's super helpful in terms of knowing when you're moving on to the next piece of evidence. Maybe you're not going to go off case. That's super, super helpful in terms of getting the judge to kind of notice that, oh, the debater's going to be moving on to a different topic. Let me grab a different flow sheet now. You can do that by saying first and then say your argument, second, say your argument, and then you can say third. Sometimes people just say and they really emphasize that. Or I like when people say next. That's kind of signaling moving on. Another thing, which is especially important as you continue it throughout debate and as you get into higher levels, is to split the negative block. So, though things are a little bit different this year because of COVID, on a typical debate year, you have the 1NC and the 2NR, or the 2NC and the 1NR, and they go back to back. So that's important because the affirmative doesn't have time to answer the 2NC because the 1NR gets to give their speech. So you always want to make sure that you're not being repetitive in those back-to-back speeches. So though it's really important to go into depth and explain your arguments, there's no need to repeat arguments in two separate speeches. Instead, you could be using that time to better talk about another argument, extend something, maybe explain something more clear to the judge. So in general, just try and be efficient. Also, if you get into higher levels of debate, the 1AR is definitely always a very hard speech. And something you can kind of do to organize your speech would be to group certain arguments that are similar, and that kind of makes you more efficient and you're able to save time. And then you can kind of go into depth about other arguments too. So I know that one had a lot of content on it, but this one also, just as important as the rest, is to be nice and excited. I know it's hard to wake up early and go to a debate tournament, but we're all there because we ultimately enjoy debate. And I know that every debater that goes through a tournament has been working so hard, reading all your evidence, going through, highlighting, practicing speeches, writing blocks. There's a lot of work that goes into preparing for a tournament. So the tournament is finally that time where you could just show off kind of all that you've been preparing, everything that you know. So be excited because an excited debater is an excited judge. It makes it more enjoyable to always watch the debate round and for us to give you guys feedback. So, and another time that's especially important to make sure that you're being nice and excited is during cross-examination, which is really the only time in the debate where both sides are talking at the same time. But you always just want to make sure that you give the other team an opportunity to speak because doing so won't necessarily lose you the round. To always just be polite in every circumstance that you can and always just make sure to have fun in your debates, and I promise it will go great.